Gavin Newsom gets his presidential run started very early out in South Carolina. California is supposedly super serious about housing this time around. And the former head of the Los Angeles Homeless Service Agency was found to have done no wrongdoing when giving $2 million to her husband's nonprofit. All that and more coming up on this episode of the California Underground Podcast, starting right now. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the California Underground Podcast, the most trusted podcast for all things California politics. I am your host, Phil. We have a ton of stories to get to tonight, plus some more, and maybe some more good news. Like to end the show on some good news as well. But before you get started, if you haven't already, please help out the channel by making sure you like, share, comment, review. All of that stuff helps with the algorithm, helps more people find us. Let's get started with our first story of the night. We all knew it was coming. We knew he's been laying the groundwork. And this past week, Gavin Newsom finally took the first step to run for president of the United States. That's right. Gavin Newsom made a trip to South Carolina for some reason regarding getting federal dollars and help or something about that and something about Trump. But regardless, South Carolina is pretty important in the Democratic primary. So why is he out there? Well, we'll watch this story and then we'll get into it.
Welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I am Andy Mack. This next story has me asking myself, what year is it? The 2028 presidential election is more than 3 years out, but some potential candidates are already meeting voters in some early key primary states. And as we know, the race for the White House is a marathon, not a sprint. California Governor Gavin Newsom is one of those potential candidates. We're being joined right now by Fox's Asher Red as he follows the Democrat on a 2-day tour of rural South Carolina. Thank you so much for joining us from Lawrence, South Carolina in the Palmetto State. What did you hear from Newsom? What was his message to voters a long way out?
Well, good evening, Andy. Gavin Newsom, a Democrat from California, traveled all the way here to rural South Carolina to pitch his political views to historically Republican voters. Now, this church behind me is where his last event of the day just wrapped up, and he's already headed back to California. But Newsom isn't the only one who seems to be testing the waters of a possible presidential bid. For many, it feels like the 2024 campaign just ended, but that's not stopping potential candidates from getting an early start on 2028.
I need some coffee.
If Governor Newsom does decide to run for president, an official announcement likely won't come for quite some time. But that didn't stop the California Democrat from bringing his message to voters in rural South Carolina this week.
The question is, how do we not only repair the party brand, but repair this nation, and how do we move from a defensive posture to an inspiring vision? And so that has to also be the project that occurs concurrently as we push back against Trump and Trumpism.
Newsom told.
So if you notice, he's going to be talking about repairing the brand of Democratic politics. He's been doing a lot of this, trying to move more towards the middle, trying to make himself more moderate. This is why he's going to South Carolina, is a red state, and there's a lot of Republican voters out there, a lot of moderate Democrats. We'll get into sort of the breakdown of the voters, but that is why you can tell he's kind of laying the groundwork of a national message, not just, hey, I'm from California. I'm here to talk to you about how wonderful California is. He's preparing that national message.
In South Carolina that the country needs less political polarization, and that's something a lot of voters here are thinking about too.
I think the polarization isn't going to end, which is why we need strong Democrats to combat that.
Other Democrats stirring speculation about.
I don't think the polarization is going to end, so we need strong Democrats. Okay. I mean, you're just buying into the politicization and the political tribalism, but okay.
Potential White House runs include Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. He spoke at a Democratic fundraiser in New Hampshire in April. In May, former Transportation Secretary and 2020 Democratic candidate Pete Buttigieg held a town hall in Iowa.
There's also no natural front runners in the Democratic Party. You know, they kind of have a spotty bench. It's a little bit anybody's game if you can get out there and build a reputation.
Some political analysts say the early bird approach could help candidates build name recognition while they test out their pitch to voters.
Some of what's going on, I think, probably too, is political messaging. And, you know, what works and what doesn't work and what resonates with people.
And Republicans are also heading to early primary states as well. Just later this summer, Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia is expected to speak at events both in Iowa and right here in South Carolina. Andy?
All right, thank you so much. It's always interesting when we see these potential candidates always make stops coincidentally in early primary states. Gavin Newsom, though, has pushed back that he's not seeking a bid for the White House, right?
Yeah, he did reiterate he's not publicly at least, seeking any Oval Office position. As of right now, obviously that could change.
BS. Oh, sorry. Must have caught something in my throat.
Especially if he flew from California all the way here to South Carolina to do this. But in 2026, think about it, Governor Newsom will be out of a job practically because he is term limited for governor of California. We asked him if he thinks Kamala Harris would take his position, and he said he doesn't know that either, but he wouldn't be surprised.
All right, very good. My last question.
All right, so South Carolina. It's no coincidence that Gavin Newsom just showed up in South Carolina, right? It's not like he picked it out of the hat or for whatever BS reason he came up with that he wanted to go to South Carolina because he thinks they needed federal dollars for disaster relief or something like that. None of that is really what he's doing. It is so blatantly obvious that Gavin Newsom is slowly but surely building up his platform, testing out his message in these red states, testing it out on moderates. You've seen him on these podcasts. He was on the Sean Ryan podcast where he was gifted a gun and they had to make sure it was California compliant. Of course, it has to be on the California handgun roster, which is completely unconstitutional, but that's a whole different story. And he says, "Oh, I'm not anti-gun. I'm actually, I just want common sense gun control." Yeah, okay. This coming from the guy who signed off on basically everything, wanted to ban your right to carry and conceal here in California. You know, he thinks that AR-15s are these automatic weapons of like war type weapons that can shoot a bajillion rounds with just one press of the God mode button. This is no coincidence that he ended up in South Carolina. Why is it not a coincidence? Well, strategically, and they alluded to that in the video, South Carolina is one of the first primary states in the Democratic primary. You have Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. It kind of goes that way. And South Carolina is an interesting state because it's one of the more conservative states. And in fact, it's been sort of a predictor of who's going to be the Democratic nominee going forward. Now, if you remember in 2020, when Joe Biden was running in the Democratic primary, remember those? They used to have Democratic primaries, but they don't really like to do that anymore. It's amazing they're going to have another Democratic primary. Joe Biden in 2020 was able to win South Carolina mostly because everybody dropped out and coalesced behind Joe Biden, and he got the endorsement from James Clyburn, who is a very powerful and influential representative down in South Carolina. And that was sort of the push that people needed to see that Joe Biden is palpable and he can appeal to moderate voters and swing voters, which is important in an election because that's really who people are going after, is those independent swing voters. So that is really the bellwether for a lot of people. If you can win in South Carolina, it shows you a broader appeal across the country. And that's why it is so important. Now, South Carolina has petitioned to be the first state. It wants to be the first state in the Democratic primary. It's always been Iowa for all these parties. Iowa has always been the first state, but South Carolina wants to be the first state now. But that's sort of where the strategy lies. If you win South Carolina as a Democrat in the Democratic primary, you kind of pave your own way to win more states coalesce your support, coalesce the fundraisers, all of that behind you. The first three are always kind of a toss-up. I think like Pete Buttigieg in 2021, Iowa, but then didn't win New Hampshire, South Carolina. So he kind of flamed out really quickly. That's why he's there. It is absolutely no coincidence that he just ended up in South Carolina talking about spreading the message and fixing the national brand of Democratic politics. Now, one of the things that Newsom is going to have to contest with, one is it is a red state, and he comes from a very deep blue progressive state. We all know that. And I'm sure people in South Carolina don't look at California and think, boy, howdy, let me get some of that California here in South Carolina, because they see what's happening with the homelessness and the cost of housing and the cost of gas and all that stuff. They don't look at California as a model for what they want South Carolina to be. So he's got to try and figure out how to move closer to the middle. I'm now doing the Gavin Newsom dance with my shoulders. He's got to figure out how to move more towards the middle and appeal to those people, which is why they made a whole big deal about him getting a gun. And he said, oh, I'm not anti-gun. That's one thing. He's got to get those moderate Democrats. And he's been working hard at smoothing out his image or getting that image of he's just a common sense moderate. That's all he wants. You know, he's just a common sense moderate. The other thing that is really important is the African-American vote, which is why Representative James Clyburn is so crucial to whoever wants his endorsement in South Carolina. Now, they appeared at this event. James Clyburn actually said something to the effect of the next president of the United States or someone who's running for president. He kind of made it a slip of the tongue that like, oh, you know, Gavin Newsom, he is going to be, you know, running for president, even though Gavin Newsom is acting like he's not running for president. We all know you're running for president is the worst kept secret in politics right now. But the African-American vote in South Carolina is very, very crucial to winning that state, which then, like I said, becomes the momentum that you're going to need to move forward and win moving for the rest of the Democratic primary. This is according to a Public Policy Institute of California poll. This was conducted recently as of May 2022 to 29th in 2025. It says 56% of African-American voters in California approve of Governor Gavin Newsom's job performance. Additionally, this poll suggests that only 43% of black voters nationally, black voters nationally rate Newsom as very favorable, and only 26% of black Californians believe he responds to black community needs, though these figures reflect sentiment beyond just approval ratings are not conclusive. So he's got some work to do, right? He's got some work to do with African-American and black voters. This was a tweet recently. It says, this will definitely fuel even more speculation about a 2028 run, referring to Gavin Newsom. However, if Newsom plans to win the Democratic nomination, he's going to have some work to do convincing the vast majority of black voters. Only 43% of black people rated him very favorable compared to less than 50% for both, or more than 50% for both Harris and Biden. So he does have some work to do in that area. Now, is he making the right strides? I don't know. Is he schmoozing James Clyburn, who is a very influential politician in South Carolina? Can he get his endorsement? He's getting there early, and that might be the name of the game. But regardless, you are seeing the beginning stages of Gavin Newsom's presidential run, right? We all knew this was coming. The podcast was part of it. We all knew that he has this Campaign for Democracy PAC, which he's going to end up probably dumping all the money into his presidential campaign, something like, you know, tens of millions of dollars that he's already raised. He's going to dump that into his presidential campaign once he announces. He's basically just laying the groundwork, and he's getting there early. He's trying to get his face out there. He's trying to make it seem like this is all altruistic. But why is the governor of California, who has enough on his plate, worried about going 3,000 miles away to a state that has nothing to do with California? We have enough going on here in California that he should be absolutely worried about. Why is the Palisades taking so long to rebuild? That should be a big issue. We should be talking about gas prices. We should be talking about homelessness and all of that. Crime is still an issue. There are enough issues that Gavin Newsom has to fix here in California. And if he does not, he doesn't have much time left. if he doesn't do anything to even move the needle on a lot of these issues, his presidential campaign is probably already dead in the water, because no matter how much he wants to just ignore and be the deadbeat dad who doesn't care about California, the deadbeat governor, at the end of the day, people are going to remember that California is in really dire straits after he left. So he can't really campaign on the fact that he left California a better place, because we all know it's not really in a better place. So he may be starting early, but instead of work in South Carolina, probably the best work he could be doing is right here in his home state of California. All right. I'm going to take a little sip of water. Welcome to everybody who is hanging out in the chat. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us tonight, wherever you are hanging out. We're going to hit some more stories. We got 3 other stories tonight that I want to get to, and I'll be interspersing with some of the chat. Everybody who popped in, thank you for tuning in. Somebody said he isn't electable for he is a failed governor. Yep. Like I said, if he can't change anything, and it's going to be hard pressed for him to change anything at this point, then he's already dead in the water, right? Let's see. Camille said, doesn't he have a state to run? Yeah, he does have a state to run. We live in that state. All right. Let's get to our next story. California is really, really super serious about tackling the issue of housing and the affordability of housing this time. They promise this time they are really, really serious. They're really tackling the issue. Let's get into the story.
It was a major day in the state capitol.
It was too urgent, too important to allow the process to unfold as it has for the last generation.
California's $320 billion budget is now law, but the process came with strings attached. Governor Gavin Newsom signed 2 major bills, but not without a controversial move, leaving environmentalists disappointed. ABC 10's Garshpal Sangha joins us in studio and looks at the law that, if not passed, could have derailed months of work. Garshpal.
Yeah, Laura, some called it a poison pill because the governor signed the budget last week, but he said his signature would be invalid if the lawmakers didn't make changes to SQUA. And tonight, he got his way.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Pen to paper, Governor Gavin Newsom signed 2 bills, AB 130 and SB 131. They strip away key parts of SQUA, the California Environmental Quality Act, which for decades gave environmentalists and communities the power to block projects they disagreed with.
The most consequential housing reforms that we've seen in modern history in the state of California. Long overdue, absolutely.
Supporters say the changes are crucial to fast-track housing in a state with a severe shortage. The new law skips lengthy environmental reviews, making it easier to build housing in urban areas.
Saying no housing in my community is no longer state sanctioned. That is not allowed anymore in the state of California.
But
whether you like it or not, we're going to shove housing down your throat. That's what Buffy Wicks is saying. Got Buffy Wicks, Oakland, State Representative Scott Wiener, who we all know. And they put all these guys investing back. I guess that shows you that these guys are ready to start working on housing. That's the image that they want to portray. But yeah, it's basically this argument of NIMBYism or YIMBYism that they're fine with. They want to shove housing in as many places as possible. Now, I doubt where they live is probably going to be affected by this, so the housing and the congestion is not going to be shoved down their throats particularly. But you peasants, you better get used to this. They're going to start shoving housing down your throat, and it's going to be really congested in your neighborhood. So just get used to it.
Process is what has critics worried. The governor threatened to block the entire budget unless SQUA was rolled back, a move some say undermined democracy.
It was a insistence upon the governor that the legislature do that, which I believe compromises the co-equal nature of the 2 branches.
Environmental groups like Sierra Club argue the reforms could allow projects harming wildlife and limiting public transparency.
It's sad to see the state legislature taking a page straight out of Trump's playbook and ramming through policy to tear apart SQUA through the budget process instead of the actual policy process.
Say that again? Taking a page out of Trump's playbook and ramming through to destroy SQUA. Hope this kid isn't a political science major, because that is a weak argument, my friend.
The governor insists it is not the end of SQUA, and the law won't be used to fast-track fossil fuel projects.
This was too urgent. This was too important to play chance. The world we invented has been competing against us. We have got to perform.
Now that reform takes effect in less than an hour. Now Democrats call it a balancing act between California's green values and a housing crisis. Laura.
And Garshpal Sangha reporting for us. Thank you.
SQUA. Let's start off here. SQUA, if you're not familiar with what SQUA is the California Environmental Quality Act, passed back in the 70s, I believe, when Ronald Reagan was governor. The intent of it was to protect California environment so that we weren't building a ton of projects and ruining the environment. That was started back in the 70s. Since then, SQUA has become not necessarily a tool to protect the environment, but a way to shake down a lot of developers. And it's one way that the cost of housing gets so damn expensive here in the state, is because it is so easy that if someone wants to build something, they can literally just go and file a lawsuit, and that lawsuit can then hold up the developer. So basically, it's a win by losing strategy. Basically, they file this lawsuit knowing they're going to lose. They don't care. They file the lawsuit, it gets tied up in court for 5 to 10 years. It takes forever for these lawsuits to get through. And basically, they then go and hold ransom the project to the developers and say, well, we'll back off if you hire this person or hire this union and blah, blah, blah. Like, they get what they want. So developers who start to develop something and have these, prospectuses, plans and business plans that they have laid out, and the numbers have all been crunched, then all of a sudden a SQUA lawsuit comes in, throws everything out the window. So that's the problem with SQUA. While I want to say I'm hesitantly happy that they are trying to cut away parts of SQUA, I will say this. There is one simple solution that California legislators just don't want to admit. And it is the simplest solution that could help with housing and a lot of projects here in California. And I'm going to say it very slow, so if there are any Democratic legislators in Sacramento happen to be listening to this, it's very simple. Pay attention. You can write it down. Scrap SQUA. Scrap it. Start all over. Just gut and get rid of the entire thing. Start all over. At this point, there are more holes in SQUA than Swiss cheese. There are so many exemptions and loopholes and carve-outs for SQUA. Just ban it. Just get rid of it. Right? Just write a law that says, a simple one-page law says, we completely and utterly repeal the California Environmental Quality Act. And then as you start to see fit, maybe if you want to reintroduce a new bill that's a little bit more reasonable, then maybe you could do that. But the simplest thing is scrap it. Just say it was wrong and it's gotten way out of hand and we just want to scrap the whole thing. But again, what's the golden rule, politicians, is that they never, ever, ever, ever admit that they were wrong, right? They never admit that they did anything wrong, that they supported SQUA in the past. So they're never going to completely scrap SQUA because they, in the end, don't want to admit that they were wrong. Now, there are these two bills. I'm going to read some of my notes about it. AB 130 exempts urban infill projects. So that basically means apartments, homes, mixed use stuff from SQUA that they fit local zoning and avoid sensitive areas like wetlands. No more than 1,000-page studies, just a 30-day approval window. I had to look this up because I'm not a real estate developer. What is infill? An infill site has been, quote, previously developed for qualified urban uses or is adjacent to developed parcels. Qualified uses include any residential, commercial, public, institutional, transit, or transportation passenger facility, or retail use, or any combination of those uses, as well as some industrial uses. What does that mean? Those lots that you see in cities that are not being used, that are dead lots, they are now going to fast track building in those lots. So basically, it's urban building. There's going to be a lot of urban building. You're going to start seeing that. So in places like San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, you're going to start seeing these lots that were previously empty are now all going to start sprouting up with more housing or maybe some residential or commercial stuff. Basically, we're going to increase the density in these urban centers. So everybody wants the 15-minute cities, right? That's what they say. They want everyone in these 15-minute cities. They want everybody on public transportation. They don't want people in their cars. They don't want you to be independent. They're building and forcing a lot of people into these cities. So that's one thing. So they've exempted these projects in these urban places where it's these infill developments so that they can start to push people more into the city. So it's not suburban sprawl, but they're going to make it easier that you can start developing and not worry about SQUA or any of these SQUA lawsuits or studies so much. SB 131 streamlines SQUA for projects that miss full exemption by focusing only on specific issues, cutting lawsuit risks. Coastal zones also got easier permitting under the California Coastal Act, but streamlining doesn't guarantee homes get built. It still depends on local zoning and high interest rates and all that stuff. So that basically means that previously, if there was a lawsuit or there was something you missed or there was something wrong, it wasn't the whole project was held up, or now they're going to fix this so that the whole project isn't going to be held up. Basically, it's just one specific issue that you're going to have to fix. That's what it comes down to. So between these two, they are planning on building a lot more housing. Now, does it mean there's going to be more suburban housing? No. Does it mean it's going to be more apartments and stuff in downtown centers and urban centers? Yes, that's what it's going to mean. I personally, when I think of housing, maybe I'm old school or maybe I'm not thinking about this right, but I think of housing, I think of houses, not apartments that you're going to rent. I think of housing. And maybe they think if we just keep adding more and more units in these cities, that will make it easier for people to find affordable housing because they can then live in these downtown centers. I guess that's their strategy. Will developers get excited about this? Maybe. Maybe they'll see it as an opportunity that they want to build in these downtown areas. But there was something else. And unique to California is not only do they not want to admit that SQUA is a horrible bill and that they should just get rid of it altogether, one thing that California is known for, that when they need to solve a problem, what do? They create more government, right? It's always more government. More government is the solution. So as part of this whole reform that Gavin Newsom is rolling out, they've created a new agency on top of the, how many agencies? I don't know, 58, 75 or something. There's a whole ton of agencies, state agencies that are in California. They are now creating a specific housing agency to just tackle housing as if there wasn't a housing agency before. And they think this will help streamline a lot of things with the state. It says supporters of the bureaucratic reshuffle say the move is long overdue, and surveys Californians regularly name housing costs and homelessness among the state's top concerns. That alone warrants the creation of a new cabinet-level advisor to the governor, said Ray Pearl, executive director of the California Housing Consortium, which advocates for affordable housing development, a cabinet-level secretary who will sit with other cabinet secretaries whose purview will be housing. That is elevating the agenda to the highest level. Pearl, like virtually every expert interviewed for this article about the new agency, described the reorganization as just the first step in bringing much-needed order and efficiency to California's network of funding programs for affordable housing. Quote, simply moving people around and giving them a new business card doesn't change the system. I would agree. I mean, creating more government and a new agency is the MO of California politicians, is that there is no problem too big that government can't solve. I mean, keep in mind, this is the same state government that believes that they can tax our way into better weather and to clean the air, right? That's their belief, is that they can tax and regulate their way into solving the weather problems. So I guess they think anything can be solved with more government. And now they've created a whole new agency. Will that new agency actually do what it needs to do? I don't know. And we have yet to see, and they want to make it sound like it's a great idea. But like every bureaucratic agency in California, it's probably going to get filled with a bunch of people who don't really care about getting the job done. It's probably going to be slow, inefficient, which is kind of the MO for a lot of agencies in Sacramento. So is it just moving the chairs around on the Titanic? What they say, moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic? Probably. I mean, it just makes it seem like there's not really any solution besides creating this new agency and more government for California. So with that all said, again, more government. Their solution is more government, more agencies. My solution is much simpler. Scrap it all. Start all over. Or don't start over at all. Just scrap SQUA and just be done with it. Because I've always said, the one way you're going to get government, the one way that government can help with housing is get the hell out of the way. That is the number one way government can help. That's it. That's really what it comes down to. Get out of the way, let people build housing, and be done with it. That's your solution. Stop trying to overthink it. All right. Take a little sip of water. Check the chat, see how everyone's doing. They're live on YouTube, X, Rumble as well. Let's see. Name a California agency you want to keep. I can't think of one now that I think of it. No, I can't think of one. I can't really think of one agency. I mean, if there was one time we went through like the list of agencies, I think it was a Brian Dolly who was on the show, and he was running for governor, and we asked him kind of like point blank, like, would you get rid of this agency? Would you get rid of this agency? Would you get rid? And pretty much all the answers were yes, because there's so many agencies in California. We don't need another agency. That's for damn sure here in California. We need less government. Like I said, we need to get rid of government out of the way more in California, because clearly the idea of pouring more government into these problems is not working for California. Shocker to no one, when the government investigates itself, it usually finds no wrongdoing at all. If you're not familiar with this story, we'll give you a little bit of background on it, but I want to read this article first. This is from the LAist. They've been doing an incredible job of keeping us informed on this whole story. In fact, they were really the ones who broke the story about what is happening at the LAHSA, Los Angeles Homeless Services Agency, LAHSA. It's a tough one to say. And what's been going on with this lady, who is Dr. Valicia Adams Kellum. She was the chief executive officer for the LAHSA. And, well, we'll give you a little background. She was under investigation because she was found months ago to have signed, mistakenly, that's her story. Mistakenly. It was a mistake. She didn't mean to do it. Mistakenly signed as the CEO of the agency that is supposed to be helping homeless $2 million in checks to her husband's nonprofit. Mistakenly. Just so happened she just signed 3 checks that ended up being $2 million to her husband's nonprofit. And they just concluded that review, that investigation. And to no surprise at all, the review commissioned by LA, her husband's employer, The article goes on to say the leader of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority has been cleared of misconduct related to her signature appearing on $2.1 million contract with her husband's employer, according to the agency, otherwise known as LAHSA. The LAHSA Commission hired an outside law firm in March to investigate contracts for Upward Bound House. About a month after LAist first reported that documents showed Valicia Adams Kellum, the agency's outgoing chief executive, signed the contract and 2 amendments. In a Wednesday memo from Norton Rose Fulbright, the firm said Adams Kellum did not act unethically or improperly in agreements between the agency and Upward Bound House, a Santa Monica-based nonprofit where her husband, Edward Kellum, works in senior leadership. According to the memo, Adam Kellum's signatures on several documents and agreements related to the Upward Bound House were unintentionally applied by her staff after they were approved by LAHSA and Commission without her input. Oh, so that's it wasn't now it's mistaken. Now they were done without her input. They just did it behind her back. It was an auto pen thing. It was a Joe Biden thing. They just signed it on her behalf. LAist reported in February that a different LAHSA spokesperson said Adams Kellum mistakenly signed the contracts after staffers inadvertently sent them to her. When the CEO has a conflict of interest, LAHSA's standard practice is for contracts to instead be signed by the agency's top programs officer, the spokesperson said. A $2 million contract signed by Adams Kellum authorized federal taxpayer funds for Upward Bound House to pay rent for unhoused people in the region, help them find homes. The money also covered case management and administration costs at the nonprofit. Federal tax dollars. Funneling federal tax dollars to your husband's nonprofit, not a conflict of interest in Los Angeles. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. You're the CEO of the agency that is supposed to be spending money on homelessness and solving homelessness. You give it to your husband's employer at this nonprofit, $2 million. It's no small amount of money. Federal dollars. Hello, Pam Bondi. Are you awake? Are you out there? This is federal money that is being funneled from one CEO of a government agency to a nonprofit where her husband works. Hello, Pam Bondi. Is anyone home? Anyone pick up the phone there? I mean, I know you dropped the ball on the whole Epstein thing, but maybe you could, I don't know, maybe look into this and maybe see where all the money is going out here in California, where the millions of dollars are going, federal funds and state funds. Can we talk about that? This is not new, though, to California, because this whole story reeks of corruption. We've covered it before. We've done a couple episodes on this, because not only was it this $2.1 million contract signed by Valicia Adams Kellum, when they first came down on her, the court came down on her, and we're going to get to the court in a second, because there's a federal court judge who's keeping an eye on this stuff, and he's not very happy about it. They told him, you have to disclose these 700 forms, I think it's 710, 740, these forms to show conflict of interest. And under Dr. Valicia Adams Kellum, they refused. They didn't want to produce these forms to show if there's a conflict of interest between any members of the LAHSA and anybody outside that they are dealing with. They didn't think it was proper. They were like, why do we have to show that there's a conflict of interest between us and any nonprofits that we give money to, or any of these contractors that we give money to? That doesn't seem fair. We shouldn't have to do that. They refused and tried to hold out as long as possible. Then they got some more, and they got some information. They were forced to do so. But that's the sort of transparency we're talking about with the LAHSA, is they refuse to disclose forms that should be available to the public regarding conflict of interest. They didn't want people to see what was going on conflict of interest wise. Okay? That's what we're dealing with here. This is an agency that is completely out of control. Now, mind you, Dr. Valicia Adams Kellum was begged by this woman right here. I can't remember her name, but she is like the right-hand woman to Karen Bass. So when Karen Bass won to be mayor, this woman tracked down Dr. Valicia Adams Kellum and begged her begged her to be the CEO of this homeless authority. And then in a couple of years, absolutely destroyed it. It's now under federal investigation by a judge. It's been audited. It is a complete disaster. And the fact that she got away with this, I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked at all. But I don't think it's the end of the story for her and LAHSA. But I do want to get to this because there was an audit that was done. And this is what I was talking about this judge who is really upset about what's going on with like Los Angeles homeless spending. Audit reveals LA's failure to track billions in homelessness spending, raising accountability concerns. A new audit exposes LA's lack of oversight in tracking $2.4 billion in homelessness funds, with a federal judge calling out a high level of noncompliance by outsourced agencies. Now city officials face mounting pressure to take responsibility. An independent audit commission Thursday by U.S. District Judge David O'Carter shows how LA city officials have neglected tracking homelessness spending. The city has failed to collect accurate data on its vendors, relying mostly on outsourcing from an agency. This highlight is another frustrating case of taxpayer dollars becoming misallocated after auditors revealed $2.4 billion in city funding. The global consulting firm Alvarez Marcel Audit highlights inadequate financial oversight that paints a lack of accountability for taxpayer dollars. Quote, insufficient financial accountability led to an inability to trace substantial funds allocated to the city programs. The lack of uniform data standards and real-time oversight increased the risk of resource misallocation and limited the ability to assess the true impact of homelessness assistance services. Most of the discrepancies were found at the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. Tracking spending became impossible when auditors reviewed the poor documents provided by the agencies. Auditors also found that LAHSA, quote, failed to verify whether the services invoiced were provided. Let me say that again. Auditors found that LAHSA, quote, failed to verify whether the services invoiced were provided. $2.1 billion that they can't find. And you have invoices from the LAHSA to contractors that they don't have proof that they are paying or getting the services that they are supposedly paying for. I want that to really sink in, because what we're saying here is they just did not keep track of the money going out to these contractors and these nonprofits and whether or not what they were paying for was actually provided. Or the worst case scenario is they didn't care whether or not these services were provided. The pessimist in me says it's the latter. When you have the CEO handing out $2 million to her husband's nonprofit and thinking there's nothing wrong, and then you have invoices where they couldn't tell whether or not the services that they paid for were provided. That makes me think this was funneling money out to people who were connected as a slush fund and not getting to the actual homeless issue. That's my thinking. And I think no matter how much this commission says, oh, Dr. Valicia Adams-Callum did nothing wrong, she was cleared of all wrongdoing, I would say she probably better get a good lawyer, because I don't think this is done yet. And David O'Carter, a federal judge, is coming down on them like a ton of bricks. He's not putting up with it. He's not putting up with Karen Bass. He's not putting up with the LAHSA. He's not putting up with any of it. Karen Bass thought that they didn't have to look into this because it was something created by, there was some sort of organization that Karen Bass created. They were like, wait a second, you created an organization, we have to look into that. She didn't think that you had to make that public and let anybody know what the money was being spent for. Now you have the LAHSA under Dr. Valencia Adams-Kellum, who didn't want to tell you about conflict reports, can't tell you whether or not what they use taxpayer funds for were services that were actually provided. This sounds like an enormous slush fund that is just pumping billions of dollars out to well-connected people. And this is why people say there is a homeless industrial complex going on in California because of stuff like this, because money is being poured into homelessness as an issue. And there's no results. No results. Absolutely no results. Just to put it into context, in the past 10 years, I think is the number that we all know, spent $24 billion. The state as a whole has spent $24 billion on homelessness and housing projects. The figure covers more than 30 programs administered by 9 state agencies, including initiatives like Project Home Key, and prevention and assistance and prevention program, homeless housing assistance and prevention program, $24 billion. And then an audit came out that said, we don't know where the money went. We don't know if it did anything. $24 billion. And then this year, or was it last year, they snuck it in when people weren't paying attention because it wasn't during a normal election cycle. They snuck in Prop 1 to take out another, was it $8 billion for homeless spending? Borrowed it. I borrowed it. They're going to take out a bond for $8 billion, which by the time we're done paying for it as taxpayers, because we're on the hook to pay bonds. Because the state doesn't produce money. It's not like they make money, so they got to get money from us. We're going to be on the hook for $10 billion. And the grift and the slush fund continues and continues and continues. And until people get in there and start ordering to show what is going on, this homeless industrial complex will continue to funnel billions and billions and billions of dollars through this, and it will never, ever stop. They will never solve homelessness. They have no desire to solve homelessness. They don't. The amount of money that we have spent on homelessness, it should be at least solved or at least completely greatly reduced. Not small fraction points, not little small decimal points here and there. It should be mostly solved, but it's not. So, yeah, like I said, Pam Bondi, if you're out there, hello, pick up the phone. I know you're busy answering questions about why you didn't produce the Epstein file. I know Bill O'Saley is up there in LA. He wants to help out. Get Bill O'Saley on the case. He'll look into that. Something has to be done here, though, because when people are getting away with what Dr. Valencia Adams-Kellum got away with, and she's found of no wrongdoing, there's no end to the homeless slush fund. It will just go on forever and ever at our expense. Let's see. What's going on, everybody? We got one more story, but I did want to check in on the chat for everyone who is tuning in live. Let me know in the chat what you think about this, the homeless industrial complex. Very corrupt and very greedy. Yep. Yeah. Can't we vote Newsom out? Well, you can vote a lot of people out. Newsom's out on his own. Let's see. Bureau of Land. Yeah, someone had brought up about the housing in rural areas. It's not the rural areas that they're going, it's the urban areas. They want people to be pushed into the urban areas. All right. After that whole thing, I did want to end on a good note. So this will be the final story for tonight. So if you got any chats or anything like that, let me know. All right, some good news in California. A feel-good story. I want to get this out here. It's a feel-good story, and I feel like I had to cover it, especially with all the news going on about homeless spending, mismanagement of funds, corruption, slush funds, all that stuff. Finally, there is a good story about how private individual charity wins. Again, and I believe this, private charities are the best way to solve problems in our society. We're going to look at this story. I think you're going to feel good after it.
A local nonprofit is helping homeless people return to their families and hometowns.
And interest in that program increased after the recent immigration raids. Corrine Winter is live in Santa Monica with some details. Hi, Corrine.
Hi, Sam and Lou. You know, we didn't have to look far here on the streets of Santa Monica to find homeless individuals who told us, yeah, we'd be up for it, a one-way ticket out of Los Angeles. You'll soon hear from a man named Michael. He's been on the streets for quite some time, and he wants to return home to Idaho. According to Santa Monica police, the homeless population has increased significantly here, and there's one local man, a business owner, who's looking to change that. We spoke with John Alley from the Santa Monica Coalition. He's a private citizen. He's not tied in any way to the government, and he's heading a family reunification program to fly homeless people out of LA, out of Santa Monica, and back to their families and hometowns here in the U.S. Places.
I want you to take note of what she said. He has explicitly said he is not tied to the government. Has nothing to do with the government. That is important to the point of this story.
Wisconsin, Chicago, and Florida. This program is funded by donors, and in the past few weeks, Allie says they've helped about 8 people. They've taken flights and bus rides home. Allie says these are people who've been living in the greater Los Angeles area for less than a year and have found it way too difficult to survive here on the streets. Allie says county and city programs for the homeless aren't entirely effective, like the multi-million-dollar housing units currently available. He says many people who are homeless would rather roam the streets where there are greater challenges with their safety, also access to food. Allie says they've even received calls from those in MacArthur Park looking to self-deport south of the border. He says, unfortunately, this organization can't help with that. He's urging those individuals to work with the government. But here's more from Michael. You want out. You said you'd love to go to Idaho.
Yeah, I'll take a free plane ticket to go to Idaho.
Why? What's in Idaho for you?
Just piece of land, the people are better. I like fishing, hunting, like that. So
we did some research just in the last 2 weeks, and we were able to partner up with Fast Response, an AI firm, and we were able to partner up with willing volunteers, citizen county advocates that live here that want to get something done, and that's what instigated this. And we've been able to reach out. Over 200 people have reached out. We've been able to help about 8 so far. We had a tough week last week because it was a holiday weekend, but they're thanking us, and their message is the same. They do not feel safe in Santa Monica. They don't feel safe in LA.
And we have put Michael in touch with the Santa Monica Coalition. Michael also telling us that one reason it's so hard here to survive on the streets is that his stuff often gets stolen at night, his food, his clothing, things that are really, really valuable for him or to him. So right now he's looking for a fresh start. That's the latest here in Santa Monica. I'm Corrine Winter. We'll be right back after this quick break.
That's a great story. And when you think about the $24 billion that California has spent on homelessness, it took upon a single individual involved in a nonprofit to go, I think I want to help, and I'm going to try and do the most direct solution I can think of, which is, do these people who are homeless, do they want to get out of California and be reunited? Maybe they never had a way to get there. If you're homeless, sometimes there's no way to get home. Maybe there's no way to contact people, or friends or family or anything like that, to start over and start a new life and not stay in California. But it took one individual to start this and is starting it right now. And you go back to the billions and billions and billions of dollars that were spent on homelessness in California, on top of the billions that were just borrowed in 2024 under Prop 1. And you wonder if all of this is being spent well. And I don't think any of the homeless spending is being spent incredibly well here. It took a private charity to step up and go, we're going to do it and we're going to help with homelessness because we want to help our neighborhood. Private charities will beat the government 10 times out of 10. I wholeheartedly believe that. Nonprofits and private charities will beat the government 10 times out of 10. Why? Because a private charity has one thing that makes them a better solution than the government, and that's competition. Private charities and nonprofits have to compete for your dollars. They have to compete and compel you that they are worth investing in or donating in, right? The government has no competition. They have no accountability. And competition is, in this sense, is the best way to hold someone accountable. Because if the government wastes money, if they funnel money to their husband's nonprofit like they did in Los Angeles under LAHSA, if there's billions of dollars lost and they have no idea whether the services were provided or not, no, the government doesn't care who they're going to investigate. The government investigates itself. You have Democrats up and down the state. You have Rob Bonta, Attorney General. You have Gavin Newsom as governor. Karen Bass is the mayor. Who cares? No one's going to check in and no one's going to hold any of us accountable because we're all on the same team. But private charities and nonprofits have to compete for your dollars. They have to show that what they're doing is working. And that competition is what makes nonprofits and private charities immensely, if not miles better than the government that provides welfare. That's my honest belief. And I think it's absolutely true. And this is a great example of how people are starting to take to private charity and nonprofits to help solve these issues. One charity I think of down here in San Diego is Father Joe's Village, which is an enormous homeless nonprofit that helps a lot of homeless people down here in San Diego. This is all just nonprofit. Donations, people donating, and they just got better and better and bigger and bigger. And that's because they provided a good product. And people believed in them. Because the government forces you through violence to give up your money to spend on homelessness. And they're not accountable to you on whether or not they spent it well or not. A private charity, you give money to a private charity. If you see they're doing good work, you go, they're doing good work. I'm going to keep donating to them. If you look at a private charity and all of a sudden you see that they're not spending money on what they're spending money on, guess what? You don't have to give them money anymore. You're not coerced into it. There's no element of violence or imprisonment to give to a private charity. So that competition is why private charities will always win over the government. So when I saw this story, I had to share it because it's a great example of how private charities, localities, local citizens working together solve issues way better than some huge behemoth, overly bloated bureaucratic state government or city government that we have here in California. So another win for private charities, already making an impact, probably helping more people than a lot of these agencies say they are, all these state agencies in California. So another win for private charity. We need more of them. Whoever it is, donate if you can. Go find them, donate them if you believe in that. Help any local nonprofit, private charities and nonprofits. They'll probably be doing more on the ground work. Check them out. All right. Got a couple of minutes left here. Thank you everyone to tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure you like and comment. You guys are blowing up the chat, which I love to see. Somebody said he ain't tied to the government until the government shuts him down. Now that it's being reported. Yeah. They don't want the nonprofits to succeed because they don't want the money going somewhere else. They want all the money going right into the coffers of the state. Now, we had an idea that was part of our Calipublican platform that we create in California, what we call, I don't know what you call it, special purpose or super special purpose, something like that. Like these nonprofits that serve a very important societal purpose, like helping the homeless. When they pass a certain threshold of like, they don't spend more than 40% on administrative costs. They have to meet strict requirements. And once they are deemed and get that certification, they are deemed these special or super nonprofits. Any dollar that you donate to them would be worth $2 in tax write-offs. Meaning that there is a more of an incentive for you to donate to them because you can get double the write-off, which means businesses can donate and get double the write-off. Individuals can donate and get double the write-off. And you're pouring more money into these nonprofits that are working, for a lack of a better term. All right. Any other comments, questions? I'm checking out the chat right now before. Will this money be provided for us veterans? No. If you're talking about homeless money, no. Probably not. Yeah, the money that went out for LA, I looked into this and I want to look into it a little bit more. Maybe next week's episode, I'll talk about it a little bit more because it's kind of hazy. Like I was like everybody else. I saw this and I was going to post something on X and Instagram about, if you haven't heard the story, LA is now giving out cash cards, like cards preloaded with cash, a couple $100 of cash to illegal immigrants in Los Angeles. And people immediately like jump to the idea of like, oh, it's our taxpayer dollars they're giving out. It looks like it's coming from nonprofits, but it does look like the nonprofit gets a lot of government funding. So I want to look into it more and connect the dots as to whether or not it is government funding, that it's just being funneled through this nonprofit and then it's going to these cash cards. That may be a story that we talk about next week. Newsom will never be president. The entire country doesn't want to become California. I mean, the ads write themselves against Gavin Newsom. They just run videos of California, just run those videos of the homeless in Los Angeles. And that's it. Just run that over and over again and show gas prices and just run that over and over again. Just as don't California my ex, whatever, Texas, whatever. All right. I think that's it for tonight. Thank you to everyone for tuning in live, especially all out there on X, YouTube, Rumble. We love to do this live so we can get your input, so you can join the show live. There is a new feature, and I may have to go into more detail on. There's a new feature that we have on our website. If you go to californiaunderground.live to contact us, if you go there, you can record a voice message, which can then be played on the show. So it's like you calling into the show. So maybe some listeners out there want to do that. Maybe they want to call into the show with their questions. So just something out there. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure you like, share, subscribe, review, share this. Because the best thing that you can do to help this show that is 100% free is share it with someone who you believe will find this interesting, engaging, and entertaining. And with that, we'll see you on the next one. Later.